It's like this big fanfare for them. Like, they're a basketball city, but like it makes it a little just real nice for us, especially given the whole Air Force situation with TSA and all that fun stuff. So,
Good morning, everybody.
so like the main
show it, and I was like, man, I really kind of wanted them to show it because you know how basically it kind of in the movie, like all he does is he just like takes the food, just like cramps it up in himself, and I'm like, oh, that would be like a crazy scene to show. Sort of. That was one of the things they kind of condensed into like he's just burning when he came out.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. As you know, we have visitors here today. Do you mind if I just have you just introduce yourself and say where you're from? Is that okay? Okay, nothing terrible. So I'm Dr. Dorbach. This is Strategic Marketing Management. So today we're going to be talking about branding and a little bit about customer relationships. And I apologize, we're like midway through a chapter, so you're kind of getting the tail end of things. But I'll try to teach it in such a way that what you missed or what was discussed before isn't too terrible. Okay? Sound good? So why don't you go ahead and just describe, just say your name and where you're from maybe.
I guess I can go first. I'm Lauren. I'm from Birmingham, and I'm a current.
My name's Max. I'm from Sylacauga. I graduated from Auburn in 23 in information systems, and I've worked at Spike Community for the past 2 years, and I'm happy to be back in the MBA program.
My name is Jenna Aronson. I'm from Marietta, Georgia. My older brother graduated from the MBA program within the past couple of years, and I'm super excited to start in the fall.
My name is Tess. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I went to Murray State University for undergrad, and after undergrad, I worked for 2 years in marketing operations for HCA Healthcare.
Okay, cool.
Hi, I'm Briley Molinero. I'm from Thomasville, Georgia, and I recently graduated from Florida State, and I'm now FEC's Golf Recruiting Coordinator.
Hi, my name is Charlie Grigaitis. I'm from upstate New York, and I'm graduating from Auburn this spring with a degree in finance.
Well, welcome all of you.
Oh.
Okay, we got more. You're interspersed. Okay, we'll start here and then. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I'm Brianna Schaefer. I went to UWG for my undergrad in graphic design, and I graduated in 24, and I'm from Newnan, Georgia.
Great.
Hi everyone, my name is C. Clay, originally from South Africa. Before coming here, my most recent role is in project management for a legal nonprofit in Montgomery, and I graduated from Yale University before that.
Cool. And then right there.
My name is Max Galliano. I'm finishing up my degree, majoring in supply chain management here at Auburn, and I'm also a cheerleader here.
Very cool. And one more. Okay.
My name is Joey Van Sickle. I'm from right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm wrapping up my bachelor's in marketing right now at Kennesaw State University, and I'll be starting here this August.
Very cool. I'm friends with Patrick Fennell there. I don't know if you kind of know him. So awesome. Okay, very cool. Well, anybody else? Okay, good. So we'll go ahead and get started. So like always, feel free to ask questions and as we go along. And so we're going to finish up our discussion on branding today. And I thought I would begin by talking about an example that really extends what we were talking about in the first half of this slide deck. And that is that when marketers go to establish their brands, you got to be thinking about, is our brand relevant in the minds of consumers, and does our brand align with our marketing program? Okay, because we talked about needing to create harmony between our branding elements and our marketing program. And so by our marketing program, I mean our 4 Ps. So our products, our pricing, our promotion, and our placement. And so I thought, Starbucks kind of does it best here in terms of illustrating the importance of how their branding needed to align with changes that they saw forthcoming with their marketing program. So here you can see the logo has changed across the years. And do you guys remember, and I apologize I say guys, but I mean that to be all-encompassing. I grew up in Wisconsin and have some different word choices sometimes. I apologize for that. So So do you guys remember, sorry, did it again, y'all, okay. Do y'all remember what happened in 2011 around this time? Do you know what Starbucks was doing with their marketing program, particularly their products or their offerings? What do you think changed around this point in time? Kevin?
This was them moving to have more breakfast and bakery items to improve margin.
Yeah, and so what they were doing around that time was really trying to expand themselves beyond coffee. Just as Kevin said, they wanted to get into some food items. They wanted to focus on tea. They wanted to get into offering like some products like thermoses and things of that sort, right, that you can buy at Starbucks. And so they really thought that by changing their branding, it allowed for that diversification, and it also aligned with their view of changing the brand to be more of like a lifestyle brand. Okay, and so to no surprise, if you have some finance experts in here, you could probably look at how much the stock price of Starbucks has improved over the years. It's probably around 500%, might even be more. But certainly that branding aligned with the change in their marketing program and has really made a lot of sense, as that brand has moved forward to have, very different offerings in the store. And so I want to mention a couple things here is that when it comes to branding and also repositioning your brand, something that we've talked about a lot, is that we have to keep in mind that when we're making these updates, we need to really stay true to ourselves and stay true to, and by that I mean the change still needs to align with our brand identity. And it needs to align with how our core customers or our target market envision, our brand. And I thought, perhaps one brand that didn't do this so well recently, it was in the news. Can anybody guess the brand that I'm thinking of?
Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel, right? And so how many of you guys are familiar with the Cracker Barrel? Yes. Okay, so what was some of the backlash there? Anybody wanna?
It was too modern.
It was too modern. Anyone else? Yeah.
They took away the home style feel that Cracker Barrel was really well known for, with all of the antiques and the old time feel of it. And they were just trying to make it more, like you said, modern and like kind of ish.
Yeah, and so it wasn't, I pulled up an image while I was just searching before here, okay? And so if we look at the original and then what they kind of came out with, and then I think they've gone back to the original, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I honestly haven't ate at Cracker Barrel in a really long time, but ultimately the brand removed a lot of those nostalgic elements that the brand was traditionally known for. It alienated a lot of its core customers, or what they thought of when they thought of Cracker Barrel and the emotional meaning behind the brand. And so I would say that's probably a good example of what you wouldn't want to do. Okay, where I think Starbucks is a good example of something that was done relatively well. Okay, and of course there was some backlash. Anytime there's a change, right, there's going to be some backlash, but it really wasn't anywhere near the degree of the backlash that Cracker Barrel experienced.
So would you say there was a miscalculation or misunderstanding of their target and core customer base? What was that about?
Well, with the Cracker Barrel, and I'll be honest, I hadn't followed it too much because I'm not a huge fan of Cracker Barrel. I don't eat there much, like I said. But I think there were probably a lot of missteps. I would question who they got the data from. Where was this pre-tested? Like, where was the market research coming from? Did they even research their core customers? Did they get the feedback from their target market? Did they, I'm really going to question the research behind what supported them to move forward with that very contemporary or modern brand. Yeah.
I think from what I gathered when I read up on it, I think they weren't trying to go with their target demographic. They were trying to expand because they were clearly very much in the more 40, 50-year-olds and older, and they thought they were trying to get to younger, more 30s and under demographic because I guess they saw that they were lacking in that, so they were just like, oh yeah, let's modernize it and then people will love it.
Yeah, but meanwhile, they hurt their core customer, yeah.
So I guess the question that comes out of that is how do you integrate and keep your core base while adding a new brand?
Yeah, and I think, and that's why I think Starbucks did it well, is you can see parts of their brand, right, remain the same. It wasn't too different, but it was different enough that it allowed them to do what the company wanted to do.
Is there a lot of because I was gonna say that's what I knew about Cracker Barrel was their idea was we're gonna modernize with the idea of trying to get younger and newer customers. But has there really been a lot of options where like companies have done that successfully? I mean, maybe I guess there have been a couple car companies that have tried, but most of the time like Starbucks, yeah, made the change, but it's more of an expansion of one of their core competencies is if I'm getting coffee and tea, is it really out of the realm of possibility of that I would also be interested in getting a ham and cheese croissant or a cookie or whatever. It's building on a core versus Cracker Barrel, like you said, is older, aimed for older, more of a like rural customer base. And while they would like to grow and be, you know, more modern and younger, honestly, that's not really gonna.
And I think this gets back to our discussion on sub-branding as well. Like we talked about how Gatorade created like a G2 brand to tap a new market. And so sometimes, I mean, maybe the best bet would be is to come up with a new brand, you know, completely viewed as separate from Cracker Barrel, that would target that different group, different colors, different branding, you know, so that people don't see, like, you know, they don't need to assume that they're related. Kind of like how Genesis, if you're familiar with the auto manufacturer, what was it? Was Genesis original Hyundai? Or was it Hyundai?
Yeah, that's what it is.
And now it's kind of its own brand. So, I mean, they separated it out. And so sometimes companies do benefit from doing that. So when we talk about branding, we need to keep in mind that we want all of our branding elements to be harmonious and particularly in line with our marketing program. And something I wanted to mention about, I know I told you this last time, but we didn't get far enough along, is that a key component to creating your brand's identity and differentiating it from competitors, particularly in mature industries too, is by having your brand have a personality, okay? Because your brand personality, or what your brand is characterized as having, plays a role in differentiation, how customers view your brand as different than competitors, and also how more generally consumers just view your brand. And to give you an example of brand personality and the resources that companies put behind it, I think we could talk about Siri. You know, Apple spent over $200 million to just acquire Siri, and then they hired creative writers and designers to ultimately create Siri's personality. Siri's personality is arguably one that has, I would say, a little bit more sass. It's a little witty compared to Alexa and some of the other, you know, digital assistants and so forth that are on the market. And Siri's been, you know, pretty successful and aligned, I guess, I would say, with the overall Apple brand. So what is a brand personality? So a brand personality is a set of traits that people attribute to a product or a service as if it were a person. So it's that whole anthropomorphism topic we talked about, how we treat inanimate objects like a computer as being human-like, with expressions like, oh, my computer hates me today, or it's going crazy, it has a mind of its own. Right? We do that a lot. And we find that customers do that with brands and give brands these human-like traits, okay, to describe its personality. And when we think of a personality, how is it conveyed? Well, it's conveyed particularly by a brand by its fonts, its colors, its imagery, its packaging, its branding, its logo, its tagline, its celebrity endorsers, its event positioning, or what it sponsors. The celebrities it's connected to, like I said there. It's just, if you go back and we think about all those associations and that sort of network of associations we talked about last time, all of those elements should be reinforcing the brand's positioning and the personality you want customers to attribute your brand as having. And particularly, I want to talk a little bit about endorser or event sponsorship and brand personality fit. Because this fit has a lot, like you want to have fit between these two things. And why we want to have fit is for a whole host of reasons, which I have on the next slide. But before we do that, I want to say earlier this semester we had Bonnie Plants, the CEO of Bonnie Plants, come in here. And so they sell their plants all over, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, a lot of different places. And in his discussion, he talked a little bit about Bonnie Plants and Martha Stewart, right? Do you guys remember that? Okay. Do you think that had a good fit? Yes, how so?
Stewart's like a home maker person.
Home improvement, okay, aligns with the product category, yep.
A lot of, when you think of Martha Stewart, you think of things that are look like a little elevated, but also the idea of this is going to be something that will make my home look excellent. A lot of the Bonnie Plants are for more home-based, decoration than instead of like an actual fruit tree or whatever.
Okay.
So it
that hedonic value versus that functional or utilitarian value, yes, right? And so I would argue too, I agree that is a great fit for Bonnie Plants. So and we'll talk about Sydney Sweeney too in a minute. So do you guys know this ad? Actually, maybe we need to talk about her first. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what is she advertising? What company is she advertising?
American Eagle.
American Eagle. And so it got a lot of impressions. Okay, the media hit on this was huge. I've got some stats on it. Okay, so it said American Eagle Outfitters saw a 20% rise in its stock price. It got 4.3 billion impressions and over 65 million in media value. And ultimately, it's arguably a successful connection. American Eagle thought that she was an authentic, confident, and comfortable individual that aligned with the brand's intentions. And so this is actually probably a decent fit with American Eagle, and certainly she's culturally relevant. I know some of you are reading the Red book right now. Red stands for relevance, ease, and distinctiveness. And so she is certainly culturally relevant. She has a following and has been, I would say, a decent endorser for American Eagle. So why do we want to have fit with the endorser and the brand? Well, because for one, you can have a whole host of benefits as listed on this slide. So oftentimes you see that when an endorser truly embodies the brand's values, people believe it. Customers believe that what this celebrity is endorsing is true. They believe like, oh, this must be a good product. They believe the endorsement is authentic, and we talked about how important authenticity is to persuasion. And so customers will ultimately build or have higher trust in the brand and in the product. They think more favorably of it. Yes.
Could you explain how possibly relying too much on influencers may dilute a brand? For example, Dunkin' Donuts went from America Runs on Dunkin' to Meg Thee Stallion and Kevin Hart and a couple other individuals. And I don't know if we have a good perception of what their brand would be.
Mhm.
So can you talk about that?
That is the risk. Right now, Tiger Woods, we could be talking about Tiger Woods. Do you guys know what happened with Tiger Woods?
Yeah. His
Huh?
brand is going down.
He what? I didn't hear it. Gosh, he got into another car wreck. Like, seriously, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know. I don't follow him, but I was, oh. This is a good example of if you're an auto manufacturer, I don't know that you would want to pick Tiger Woods to be in your ads, you know? And so if you're Nike or you have golf equipment or whatever, you know, certainly there's a better fit, but yeah. Because that's the risk with celebrities, right? Is you can't control them. And that's why some brands go to creating these characters like the Pillsbury Doughboy, because you have complete control out of the spokes characters, right? You can't control humans. Yes.
Speaking of things you can't control, and maybe you might touch on this later in the slide, I'm thinking about should brands take into consideration the political risk given different climates and also culture wars, especially the last couple of years. Should that be, because that's something that a brand does not have control over. Right? And these are ever-changing things.
Yeah. Right now, there's not a whole lot of research on brands' cultural connections to politics. There was a professor at Drexel University that was really starting to take off in that area, and then he actually passed away maybe just like a year or two ago. It was very unexpected. But yeah, I would say, and the CEO of Bonnie Plants was in here talking about how their brand intentionally did not involve or get involved with any politics stuff. And so.
And also social media engagement as well, because the dawn of social media has created a certain engagement climate that they say did not exist like in the 90s, right? So doing a brand strategy in the 90s and doing a brand strategy right now is completely different in terms of engagement and how people engage.
Yes, oh, absolutely. And that's something we'll talk about later is how quickly things can go viral. And that's kind of dangerous. But to his question though, so in terms of politics, sometimes I think it might be best not to get involved, but it might depend on the brand. It depends on the brand, their customers, what they intend to do. I mean, gosh, we could talk about what happened to Bud Light with, was it Dylan Mulvaney, right? That kind of dabbled in that area a little bit. And so sometimes it might actually be best not to get involved. But ultimately, I guess it would question what is the brand's intentions, the goals, you know, what does the brand stand for and what are their core customers saying? But to his question in the back, I think there is absolutely a fine line. You don't want to dilute your brand, and if you're choosing a particular celebrity, I wouldn't just choose a celebrity that signs up for everything, you know, like that endorses everything, because then again, that hurts the authenticity aspect, one of the benefits that come from choosing a particular celebrity. And so it's certainly something that marketers need to give a lot of thought to. And there actually are indices out there. There are marketing research firms out there. I want to say it's called the David Brown Index or something like that, that look at different celebrities and can track them and say, okay, this person has a likability score here. This person has a familiarity score here. This is, you know, and so it tracks the celebrities across a variety of different different dimensions. And so that, you know, might be considered, you know, to look at when marketers decide who to select. And for a while there, Jennifer Garner and Tom Hanks were very, very high up on the list in terms of Jennifer Garner, I think, was more on the likability side, and Tom Hanks more so on the trustworthiness side. And so I haven't looked at that in a while, but there are different databases that firms can use to help them select who might be a good fit. So to his point, yes, you don't want to dilute a brand. You don't want to dilute your brand by choosing a variety of celebrities that might stand for different things. You want to choose a celebrity, like Martha Stewart example, that aligns with your brand values and your target market and ultimately can help boost your brand or move it forward. And so what we see is, again, so we talked about authenticity, trust can be enhanced if it's a good fit, enhanced image or attribute transfer. So what happens is, let's just say, if we're talking about Tiger Woods, right, incredible golfer. Well, I don't know, does he have a relationship with the company that he advertised? Wasn't it Nike for the longest time?
Yes, it was Nike.
Nike. And so what happens there then is oftentimes people think, oh, that there's an attribute transfer. So he's an expert at golf, he uses this brand, I'm gonna be an expert and do really well, you know, like it can enhance my golf game by using brand XYZ. And so they sometimes theorize that the attributes of the celebrity, whatever they are, attractiveness, expertise, skills, whatever it is, gets transferred to the brand that they are endorsing, and then people will choose for that reason and oftentimes think they now sort of have those attributes too. And so this gets at this idea of we as consumers are oftentimes choosing brands because we believe that the brand's personality or the brand's attributes align with either our own self-image or our ideal self-image, so who we are or who we wish we were. And so that enhanced image or attribute transfer is oftentimes a huge benefit of brand endorser fit. Reach and engagement, if you pick a celebrity that has a huge reach and a lot of followers, that can be great for getting your brand to get high engagement scores, to reach a new audience, and to get expand your customers. Okay, it also can lead it to boosted sales and purchasing intentions. Certainly it's easier to sway customers if they really like the celebrity and again they think it's a good fit, and so they think, oh, if celebrity XYZ likes it, well then I'm going to buy it too because I like this celebrity. A great example of this gets back to Taylor Swift in the NFL. Okay, suddenly, when she started going to NFL games because her fiance now, is he still playing or is he retiring?
He's still playing.
Still playing. Okay. So anyhow, suddenly Swifties are paying attention to the NFL, right? And so there was a Wall Street Journal article maybe 2 years ago talking about how the rise in young females watching the NFL has really, gone up. And so it's again that idea of, okay, if I like this celebrity and they're doing it, I'm going to do it too. And so it can drive that purchasing intention and even sales and stock valuation like I gave with this Sydney Sweeney campaign. It also certainly can boost awareness because we as humans tend to follow or oftentimes pay attention to what's happening with celebrity figures. And so we tend to process there's some evidence that suggests that we are naturally drawn to, oh, why did this, okay, hopefully nothing breaks, but there's some evidence that suggests that we naturally process attractive faces quicker, we pay attention to these things, and so ultimately it can really increase brand awareness if we use a notable celebrity figure. And that's particularly important, again, when we talk about those mature industries like Bonnie Plants, been around for a while, it can kind of breathe new life into the brand. So here are a couple examples of brand personality. Same product category here, two very different brands. What brands or what brand personalities do you think are being conveyed here?
Active lifestyle. I'm sorry.
Active lifestyle. Okay, I love it. What makes you think active lifestyle? Yep,
A lot of talking about energy on there, and then
Energy,
and then the choice of activity for the
activities. Even the colors, right? It's the little bowl that stands out. What about the other one? How would you describe that brand?
Sustainability.
Okay, so he says sustainability. How so? What makes you think that?
It saves lives.
It saves lives, okay. Like kindness, sincerity, maybe? You see a flower, you see a heart. The colors are softer, okay? Again, very different brands competing in the same product category. And before, I remember the last class, I was telling you how, I was talking a little bit about incomplete typeface on logos. You remember that? And I think I wrote the word awesome or something. I was trying to delete letters. And so here's another example too, is that this research team was looking at different typeface. And so these are the kinds of examples is what I was referring to in terms of incomplete typeface. And it can be so far as to like eliminate part of the letter or one letter altogether. You know, these are pretty small edits. But what they found is that with incomplete typeface, they tend to view brands to be more innovative, okay, but actually less trustworthy. And so again, these branding elements, even just as simple as a brand name, can lead to consumer inferences about its personality, okay? And so there are 5 very common brand personalities that have been studied and are viewed to be the most dominant dimensions you see in brands in the marketplace. So exciting and sincerity, which I think the Cliff Bar would be down here, and this bar saves lives is sincerity. Again, very common branding. And then you also see competence type brands, sophistication and ruggedness as other very common brand personalities in the marketplace. And so what happens here is these bullets that I have beneath simply mean that is how that dimension is measured or thought of. And so if I were to ask you, might ask you questions like, how would you rate the Cliff Bar in regards to the brand's, you know, or maybe let me rephrase that. I don't like that stem. But to what extent do you think the Cliff Bar is daring, spirited, imaginative, up to date? And maybe it'd be like a 1 to 10 scale to not at all to definitely, something along those lines. And you would ask that for these different dimensions. And so a lot of research is like before a brand gets launched or even while we're engaging in repositioning the brand, you're going to be measuring customers' perceptions of the brands, and often, like we talked about with brand health studies. And so oftentimes you're also going to be measuring aspects of the brand's personality to make sure the branding is suggesting the brand has a certain personality given. So in other words, sincere brands score really highly on those attributes. Exciting brands score highly on those attributes. Competent brands are viewed as being reliable, intelligent, and successful. Sophistication, usually you see as upper class and charming. And ruggedness, outdoorsy and tough. And brand personality is very important because it impacts customers' expectations of the brand. And it can impact how they think employees should act, how they think the brand should be associated with certain events, certain endorsers like we talked about, the certain product features that it has. It could affect what brand extensions they view are appropriate. And to give you an example, I think of, at Publix. Okay, I view Publix as a very friendly brand. And I'm happy that their what does Publix do? What do their employees do that, let's just say, Walmart doesn't? Yeah.
They ask if you need help getting your bags to your car.
Love it, right? So they ask if you need help getting your grocery bags to your car. And so to me, that aligns right with the sincere branding that Publix has. But do you expect that same level of treatment at Walmart? No, right? And so brand personality can affect all of these different expectations we have of the brand. And in other words, it affects, if we go back to talking about all possible brand associations, it's going to affect what we associate the brand with. And at the same time, it can affect customers' perceptions and reactions to a brand failure. Okay? Brand failures are ubiquitous. Things happen, unfortunately. Yes, you try to mitigate those. But, things happen. Like right now, Meta is dealing with a lawsuit. Have you guys been following that? Okay, the mental health lawsuit. And I forgot what the dollar amount was last week. Does anybody recall?
357 million.
Ooh, okay. If Kevin's right, that's a big number. Okay, but they were going to appeal it, I believe, right? So, yeah, brand failures happen, okay? And so my point here is that brand personality can affect how consumers respond to brand failures. And the evidence tends to suggest that when you have brands that are marketed as sincere, so think This Bar Saves Lives, think Publix, think Hallmark, all those brands that are marketed to be kind and caring versus exciting brands, okay, so Red Bull, Mountain Dew, Cliff Bars, a lot of different categories, right? A brand personality can influence consumers' reactions to failures in such a way that when sincere brands experience a favor, oftentimes it's much harder for those brands to reestablish those customer relationships that they once had. In other words, it's easier for a sincere brand to lose customers following a failure, much more so than an exciting brand. And it's argued because the fundamental brand perceptions have deteriorated. And I think that we can talk about this in the context of Lori Loughlin and Miley Cyrus, okay? Celebrities are viewed as brands, right? People can be thought of as being brands. How would you characterize Lori Loughlin's brand prior to a couple years ago?
We think we're gonna like a wholesome, kind of
Wholesome,
truthful.
truthful.
And then she paid to get her kids into college and that kind of.
And then she paid to get her kids into college, yes. So Lori Loughlin, what show was she on? Do you guys recall? Or am I dating myself? Okay, so Full House. She's on was on the Hallmark Channel, right? Very much marketed to be a sincere brand. I don't think anything gets more sincere than Hallmark. So you've got a sincere brand here, and then you've got Miley Cyrus, who, her brand's changed a little bit over the years, but I would argue that she's more on the exciting side. But if you think about what happened with this college admission scandal, do you guys know what I'm talking about, or know a little bit? Yep.
Varsity
Okay.
Blues.
I'm sorry?
It was called Varsity Blues. It's
Vars-
what the FBI called the operation,
Okay.
where they did all sorts of like wiretaps and things because people were bribing the like bigger Ivy type institutions to get their kids in, usually through
Donations.
wealthier sport type, so through crew or like equestrian kind of things to get their kids who had poor test scores. And I think in Lori's case specifically, her daughter only got into Arizona State, which I'm gonna be mean to Arizona State because my dad went to University of Arizona. has a higher or a lower rejection rate than Harvard has an acceptance rate.
Okay.
So it's harder to get rejected from Arizona State than it is to get into Harvard.
Okay.
So she was like, I'm not sending my kid there, so we have to find a way to get them into USC or whatever.
Okay. So I don't know that level of detail regarding the case, but I will say that I think this is a good example in that the fact that, let's just say Miley Cyrus is the same age as Lori, and Miley Cyrus gets caught with this college admission scandal. Do you react the same? Or you just kind of shake it off and think, oh, of course, so I think that, here, why this, people were just so shocked, and her brand, like Hallmark has cut her off, and a lot of different companies that she was affiliated with were like, we're done, is because, again, those fundamental brand perceptions have been deteriorated. But it's quite possible that had her brand, Lori's brand, been a little different and more on the exciting side, people would have reacted differently. And I think right now, if you follow the Meta stuff and what's going on there, time will tell to see how much this Meta gets hurt by these issues and what changes take place. But I hate to say it, in a way I'm not really surprised, because when I think of Meta, I think of Meta more along the idea of like a competence type brand than I think of it as being a sincere brand. Okay, so whereas if there was another social media company that, was charged with intentionally or knowingly engaging in activities that they knew affected teens' mental health, if you're talking about a sincere brand, I think the reaction would be more tragic and a much more negative outcome for the brand. So with that said, again, branding personality is so important because it can help a brand build brand equity. Okay, again, going back to how we talked about creating strong, favorable, and unique associations that increase people to want your brand, making it stand out, making them willing to pay for your brand, and ultimately having and creating customer loyalty. Now, before we get into customer relationships, I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit more about brand personality and sort of the reverse side of failures. Okay? So, one of the research projects that I worked on was looking at thank you ads. Okay, so by thank you ads, I mean think about what you see when you go out shopping. Right, they might have around Veterans Day, they give special discounts to veterans, or you might see outdoor advertising thanking veterans, or TV ads thanking veterans. And then COVID happened, and what did you see? Did you guys pay any attention to advertisements during COVID?
First line workers, like in healthcare.
Healthcare workers were being thanked. Teachers were being thanked. Firefighters were being thanked. Farmers were being thanked, right? And so this idea of, I call it gratitude advertising, but this idea of companies running these advertisements, expressing their gratitude for a particular target group, became incredibly popular. And oddly, it was right around Veterans Day, November of 2019, where I was talking to one of my co-authors, and I was telling her, I said, I think we need to do research on gratitude advertising, because there's been practically zero research on it, and I question whether it's uniformly effective. In other words, does it benefit all brands? And is it equally effective for all brands? And so she's like, okay, so let's look into it. And so we wanted to understand whether or not companies that run these campaigns thanking a particular target group, are these campaigns more or less effective depending on a brand's personality. And we particularly focused on exciting and sincere brands because they are oftentimes the most popular dimensions of brand personality you see in the marketplace. And our overarching hypothesis was that, well, thank you ads are more aligned with what type of brand personality?
Patriotic?
A sincere brand, right? Like if we go back to Acres Dimensions, right? We can think of a thank you ad. The idea or the notion of thanking someone aligns more with being sincere than these other dimensions. And so we thought that, okay, those sort of ads should be probably beneficial for sincere brands, but probably not as beneficial for other brands. And we particularly focused on exciting brands, given the popularity in the marketplace. And so what we did, and there's a couple reasons why we thought that, is one, we can talk about the alignment, right? What we've been saying all along is that brand associations need to be aligned. Okay? But we also thought, in terms of the research that talks about processing fluency. So we've talked a little bit in this class how, I hate to say it, but consumers are kind of lazy, okay? That we don't oftentimes want to put a lot of effort into making decisions, and we oftentimes engage in like simple shortcuts or choose things very quickly. And so there's research on what's referred to as processing fluency, and it says that basically the ease at which you can process a stimulus or process information, oftentimes the better. Okay, it can lead to higher persuasion. However, when there's something that stands out or violates customers' expectations, like something in the ad format's unique, it makes you stand out, sometimes that extra processing or extra effort that customers have to put forth kind of gives customers pause, okay, and makes them question what's the brand's intentions, and oftentimes can actually hurt persuasion. And so we can think about, these effects might be explained by processing fluency too. So what we did in a series of studies, and I'm just going to share with you a couple of examples here, is that we randomly exposed participants to brand information. And we looked at this in terms of print ads, website design, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, so a variety of different ad contexts, a variety of different industries. We looked at coffee shops, we looked at energy bars, I think we looked at like thermoses, like your Stanley mugs. I think we even looked at restaurants at one point in time. Lots of different industries, and we looked at lots of different thank you targets. So military, teachers, farmers, firefighters, and so, because we wanted generalizability. In other words, does this effect hold across multiple product categories in multiple industries? So here's an example. So participants were randomly exposed to one of these two company descriptions. So if you take a moment to kind of glance through it, you can see that the wording is largely the same. So the first line's the same, the second line's a little different. It says, while satisfying our guests' desires for sustainable, ethically sourced coffee versus satisfying our customers' need for a jolt of energy and a quick pick-me-up. Okay, and then it talks about our employees, what we strive to do, et cetera, how we want to make customers feel. And so the word choice is very, very similar. The word length is very similar. And the idea behind that is that way you can say, in other words, if all things else are the same and the only thing you're manipulating is brand personality, then you can argue that it's the personality that's really driving the effect. So here you can see the logo was a little different, and then the tagline was different too. So warming the hands and hearts of our community versus jumpstarting the days and minds of our customers. And so participants randomly saw one of these two company descriptions. And then afterwards, they saw one advertisement. Now, the advertisement, let's just say if you were on that last slide, if you saw the Sincere brand, you were either exposed to a thank you ad or what we referred to as a control ad. So one of these two. So we had to make sure that obviously this matched what they saw first. If you saw the exciting brand first, then you randomly were exposed to one of these two ads. Okay, so the control ad was like a basic advertisement. So it said, everyone deserves John's Coffee in the morning with our wide assortment of items and the freshest coffee in town. We can make sure you start your day off right. Versus the control ad said, sometimes life gets in the way and we don't take the time to say the things we want to. To all of those who have served our country, we are humbled by your strength and sacrifices. Thank you. And so they were exposed to one of these ads, and then we asked them questions about the brand and their intentions, in this case, to go to the coffee shop. And we did this for, again, a variety of different product categories. Here's one for a Facebook ad for an energy bar. So we had Nurture energy bars versus Jolt energy bars. Okay, and again, we had a control ad. So a basic ad. In this case, it says, everyone deserves a little energy with our wide selection of flavors. Nurture energy bars has a bar to satisfy your taste while giving you that extra energy your body craves throughout the day. So notice the little heart with the leaf versus the Jolt. Okay. We were a little worried about choosing energy bars because it operates, kind of in the energy excitement space. But again, we were manipulating the brand personality. And then here the thank you ad was very similar, except it said to all of our teachers, we are inspired by your hard work and dedication. Thank you. Okay, so a little bit different there on the thank you side. But ultimately, what we tended to see in our pattern of results was something like this. Across the studies, we saw a pattern like this, such that when we're looking at Sincere brands, okay, so the ones that had the hearts, so to say, when Sincere brands have the gratitude absent is like a control ad, a basic ad, okay? The mean attention score was a 4.24. It went up a little bit for the gratitude present ad. So for consumers who were randomly exposed to the thank you ad for a Sincere brand, okay? So they didn't see the control ad, they just saw the thank you ad. The likelihood of purchasing went up, okay? But look at what happened to the exciting brand. At first, this really made us think for a moment when this happened in our very first study, is that notice the control ad, kind of similar to the gratitude ad. Okay, so a basic ad led to a mean score of 4.43. But look at what happened when an exciting brand thanked a target group. It actually went down. People were less likely to purchase or visit that exciting brand's establishment. Why do you think that was? Anybody want to take a guess? Yeah, Kevin.
It doesn't feel authentic to how the brand has presented itself. Kind of like when I saw the company A for the coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I had a specific, it made me think of a specific coffee shop.
Okay.
From my undergraduate, which had a very similar kind of vibe of oh, this is supposed to be cozy and nice, come here during finals and we give out hot chocolate or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So when they say thank you for our community and to our service members and whatnot, it's more believable because that's kind of what they're selling to and who their market is. Even if it's not specifically veterans that would be that market, it's the idea of them sincerely thanking people comes off as related to the brand.
Yep, and in this case, inauthentic for the exciting brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we found in our studies is that when that exciting brand thanked a target group, it activated, in this class, we've talked a little bit about persuasion knowledge, or this mental alarm that we as consumers have that makes us think or acknowledge, ooh, we might be being manipulated, or we might be, this is clearly an advertisement, right? And so we have that alarm in our brains that kind of makes us be on high alert. And so what we were seeing in these studies is that when exciting brands were thanking a target group, customers started to view that company as being more deceptive and manipulative and less trustworthy, okay? Because again, it didn't seem, like as Kevin said, authentic, okay? Because it raised that sort of perception of manipulative intent by the firm. But I think, again, this comes back to our very early discussion in this chapter, is that when, and even back to our discussions on integrated marketing communications, is when you're talking about your marketing program and your branding, all of those elements should be coordinated, and that particularly when it comes to branding, it should reinforce your marketing program, and that your marketing communications should be certainly aligned with your brand's personality. So again, this concept of harmonious relations is very important to building the brand equity that we talked about last time. So with that said, I'm going to shift gears to talk about developing long-term relationships, okay? Again, I apologize for those new folks entering here today that I knew it was going to be kind of a pivot because we couldn't finish up one chapter last week. So this chapter talks a little bit about how firms develop long-term relationships. And I'm going to blend it a little bit with our implementation chapter because we had to gloss or skip that given time because I know we're nearing the end of the semester. So I want to take a moment to talk about the importance of frontline employees. We're going to talk about the concepts of quality and value. We're going to talk about what marketers can do to manage customer satisfaction, how to measure it, and ultimately talk about the concept of customer lifetime value. Now, if you are assigned the Starbucks case, I encourage you to look at the last two slides of this slide deck because I realize we're probably not going to get there today, given the time. But with that case upcoming, I think it's due Sunday, that you may want to jump ahead and look to those last two slides as you work on your Starbucks case. So frontline employees. What are they? Frontline employees are those employees that your customers interact with, either through a call center, face-to-face, through a chat. Any type of employee that can interact with a customer can be considered a frontline employee. And marketing strategies need to consider the role of the frontline employee because usually it's the frontline employee who is critically involved in marketing implementation. So in other words, when a new product gets launched, your frontline employee is oftentimes the one promoting it or sharing it with customers or asking customers questions. And so frontline employees are very critical to the success of marketing strategies. And when we talk about marketing strategies, your book talks a little bit about internal marketing, and that is the idea of marketing to your employees. And that sort of marketing to employees really should help employees understand their role, their importance in the marketing program, and also motivate customer-oriented employees. In other words, employees who really value, respect, and can empathize with customers. Because your employees are the face of the firm, right? Going earlier in this class, we talked about, John, was it an espresso maker?
Check.
Right? Okay, we were talking about, imagine you were buying an espresso maker and you, let's say we're going to go buy it from, was it Target? Was that the one in our example? versus Amazon. And you go into Target and you see they have it in stock and you ask them to price match Amazon's price. And they say no. This is completely fictitious, for the record, okay? This was an example we talked about earlier. So you go in, you ask Target to price match, and they say no. And what did we say would happen then? It led to inferences of what?
They don't care about the customer.
They don't care about the customer, right? And so, again, we talked about why companies should always price match, because you might be losing that customer for life over a simple price match, okay? And so again, getting at the concept of customer lifetime value that we'll talk about later. But the idea is that employee, that frontline employee, could have said yes, could have made John's day, and John probably would have bought something else while he's there anyhow, okay? Knowing that he's saving money, by getting the deal that Amazon had, right? And so we got to make sure that our employees understand their role is critical. They are the face of the firm. What John or any of us think of that frontline employee is now how we think of the firm, okay? In other words, the attributes we attribute to that frontline employee, whether we think he or she is just respectful or competent or whatever it may be, those attributes are likely to transfer to how we think in this case of Target, okay? And so we have to be very mindful of that. And that's why training your frontline employees, development workshops, things of that can be so critical. And we want to have highly satisfied employees. And that's where, again, internal marketing comes in, is because there is that linkage between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction, meaning that firms who generally have highly satisfied customers tend to have, or let me say this, highly satisfied employees tend to have highly satisfied customers, right? There's a correspondence there. And oddly, the relationship is also reciprocal, meaning that customer satisfaction can also impact employee satisfaction, okay? I kind of think about like counselors or people that deal with problems all day, right? If you're constantly dealing with customer complaints, so you've got unhappy customers, dissatisfied customers, how are you as an employee going to feel? Maybe you're okay, but I think that would be really hard for me personally. And so again, it's that linkage there, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, really it swings both ways. And that's why this relationship is so critical. And so you want to have happy employees and you certainly want to have happy customers. Now, there's a few different frameworks that explain the relationship between employee and customer satisfaction. This was a table I pulled from this journal article here, but I want you to ignore the level of analysis. You can ignore that. And I want you to mostly focus on what these explanations mean and how they're a little bit different. So one reason why there's this relationship between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction is simply this idea of emotional contagion. Emotions are contagious. And so research shows, right, that if I'm smiling, okay, and I greet you with a smile, you're most likely to do what?
Smile back.
Smile back, right? Okay? And smiling is powerful because it can change the tone of your voice. This is back when I used to always tell my students when phone interviews were really popular, okay? I'm dating myself a little bit, but I would always say, smile when you're on the phone because it makes you sound like you have more energy and you're fun and you're motivated, you're optimistic. And so that smiling can be huge, okay? In that your good mood can rub off on customers and your sour bad mood can also make people upset too, right? So mood can be important simply because of this sort of mimicry or emotional contagion process that can happen particularly in face-to-face settings. And so emotional contagion theory is all about describing how these emotions are contagious. And so happy customers lead to happy employees or vice versa through this mimicry process at this face-to-face level. Well, there's another explanation too, and it's called the service profit chain. And this is a little bit different, and you can think of this as a chain of effects. Okay? And so the service profit chain theory poses that there's a relationship between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction as a result of these different effects happening. So I realize it can be hard to read, but it says internal services quality. That's the first box here. So it says workplace design, job design, employee selection development, employee rewards, tools for assisting customers. You can kind of think of this as the internal marketing, what your company does to equip and assist your employees. Okay? That leads to employee satisfaction. Employees that are satisfied tend to stay with the company, so your retainment is up, and they're more productive, right? So the longer you stay, economies of scale, you know what you're doing, learning curve, you know, all those things hidden, and you can be more productive. And now you're delivering an exceptional experience to your customers, okay? So that service value is there. Customers are having a beneficial experience, and now they're satisfied. And again, we characterize satisfaction as customers' expectations are met. And so customers are satisfied. If not, they might even be delighted. So when their expectations are exceeded, and in turn, that leads to customer loyalty. Okay, this idea that your company is going to retain customers, your customers are going to tell other customers about your brand, and that you have repeat purchases, and ultimately you're going to grow your revenue because your customers will buy more or recruit more customers and be profitable. So you can think of the service profit chain as a chain of effects that are occurring between those two boxes regarding satisfaction. So it's a little bit different than emotional contagion because it's focused more on these series of effects that occur, and it can occur also in a one-to-one relationship, like those face-to-face relationships we talked about. Now, lastly, there is one other theory looking at the relationship between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction, and that is simply service climate. Okay, service climate theory is more generalized. It's not that one-to-one sort of relationship. Instead, we're focusing more on the organizational context and, in other words, the context in which employees operate. What is the internal culture like for employees of a given organization? And so the question becomes, you know, how do the policies, the procedures, the processes, the rewards that employees get contribute to providing quality service and customer satisfaction? It's kind of like that internal marketing idea I talked about. And so it's looking more at overall, is the organization creating a climate that encourages and rewards employees for providing an outstanding customer experience? Because if the climate is supportive of that, then of course we would hope that customers are, well, not only employees are happy, but that customers are happy as well. So while we want satisfied customers, most companies want relationships with customers. We don't just want a one-time transaction. We want customers for a duration of time. And this has led us now to be in an era where firms are increasingly recognizing the importance of customer relationships and have prioritized customer relationship management activities. How many of you have worked for a company that has, for instance, utilized Salesforce or some sort of CRM system? Okay, great. Do you mind sharing with the class how your company uses it?
I can't remember what Regions did, but we use it in Advancement to house all of the data for like meeting our sales goals for bringing in donations for the year. Houses all of the donors' information, what they've donated to, what other colleges they've donated to, just kind of like a catch-all for all their information.
And their contacts?
And their contact information
Yep.
too. Yeah.
And like the contacts that were made or what was discussed, like so a synopsis of the engagement or conversation with that particular donor. Thank you, Gardner. Who else? Yeah.
So similar to what he shared, but for us it was more so to ensure that when different salespeople go to that particular customer, they're able to get a reference point and then know what the earlier salespeople had discussed with them. So you're not discussing different things, same things or even different things that may not be of interest to that particular customer. And also to keep in touch, maybe remember some particular key dates or information that they have shared which would be relevant for our business.
Perfect. Anyone else? One more example? Yeah.
We used it at HCA Healthcare because in marketing we were responsible for a lot of like the email list and things that went out to patients. And I will say the summer I started, we actually got hacked through Salesforce.
Oh shoot.
And so that started like a whole year-long process, and it was a really like eye-opening experience because that's something you don't really think about is like, especially in healthcare, if your patient database gets hacked, the risk with that. And so there was like a huge transformative process in when I was there. But
we did talk about having contingency plans in this course. If you remember back earlier in the semester, I know you missed that because you weren't here yet. But anyhow, yeah, so relationship management is becoming critical, okay? Most large organizations have some sort of CRM system in place. So what is customer relationship management? It's all about defining and increasing customer value in ways that motivate customers to remain loyal. Okay, so ultimately all of your activities in your marketing program should be designed to maintain your customer relationships. Okay, and when we talk about CRM, it relates to all relationship partners. So it could be your CRM is going to talk about collaboration with employees, customers. He talked about donors, supply chain, partners, vendors, all different partnerships might be included here. And they can be incredibly beneficial. Like the software that's out there that says, hey, you haven't checked in with client so-and-so in so many days. Might be a good time to check in. So in sales, there's equipment that can help you with that. And with advances in AI, I think it's probably going to only improve. And so CRM systems are, in fact, those systems that are in place that help companies with, for instance, maybe contact management, sales forecasting, collaboration and reporting, all of the different platforms out there that companies use for those purposes are likely considered a CRM system. So here at the university, we largely use Salesforce. Now, like we talked with the customer journey, having relationships and developing relationships, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And so we typically see that we are moving customers from awareness to these kind of levels of success. And the activities that take place, let's put it this way, different aspects of, if we talk back about our integrated marketing communications, different goals and marketing activities are relevant at these different stages. So if we first talk about awareness, the goals are going to be about prospecting and promoting knowledge. So what does that best? Usually advertising and sometimes cold calling, like the inside sales we talked about. Then the next phase would be initial purchase, and so you're trying to stimulate that interest. Think back to our discussion on the AIDA model, okay? And so advertising, product sampling, personal selling falls into place there. Then we just don't want an initial customer, we want a repeat customer. And so again, we want to incentivize repeat purchasing, and there are different examples or activities that might be used there, like reminder advertising. Or hey, I noticed this was left in your basket. Or you bought this before, there's an upcoming sale for that. We also want to then, after that, establish a client. And these are those financial bonds that we talked about, or those economic incentives to buy for those that are joining us today. So we think about those loyalty programs that give you points or rewards or dollars off. You know, those sort of financial incentives are oftentimes useful in building that level of relationship. From there, we tend to move on to social bonds, or that sort of personalized treatment of the customer that really creates, I almost want to call it a friendship between the customer and the firm. And so activities that happen there will be a little bit different. They're going to be more social in nature. And like sometimes you have a dedicated customer success rep at that point. You might have then move on to advocacy, where you have those structural bonds or something specific to the firm or to that buying firm. And then ultimately you have a success program, or try to, have not only just an advocate, but like someone that truly views your firm as a partner. Now I realize I'm over time, so I need to stop talking. But with that said, I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Thank you to those who are joining us today. It's wonderful having you. I hope you have a fun rest of your Monday here.
That would be a great game.